She thought she was the queen. One command, one bag of trash, and the world would bow at her feet. But the world hit record instead and wrote a very different ending for her. What happened next? Buckle up. This is a story about how pride can tear down even the highest walls. Let's be real. Alexander J., 29 years old, wasn't exactly thrilled about his current life choices. Former U.S. Marine, yes, but you'd never know it by looking at him now, dressed in a plain black security uniform, stationed at the front gate of some ridiculously massive mansion in Manhattan. His job? Guard the entrance to the new royal estate, recently purchased by some European princess whose name he couldn't be bothered to remember. It wasn't glamorous, but hey, it paid the bills. Just another long day standing under the scorching sun, watching tourists, and rich locals parade around like peacocks. Morning started out as usual. Bored tourists clicking away on their phones, wealthy joggers in designer tracksuits pretending they were in a Nike commercial, and journalists lurking around like stray cats, hoping to catch a glimpse of royalty. Alex stood like a statue, hands behind his back, face impassive. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was carved out of marble. Then she showed up. A white Jeep pulled up to the curb with a screech that could have woken the dead. Out stepped Karen Miller. Now, you've probably heard of Karens before. You know, the type that demands to speak to the manager if her latte isn't at the perfect temperature. Well, this Karen was like their queen, a legend in her own right. Stories about her terrorizing local shops and restaurants were practically urban myths. Complaining was her sport, and today, Alex had unknowingly become her next target. She marched toward him with the kind of purpose usually reserved for generals going into battle. Her hair was styled into that perfectly stiff bob that somehow defied both gravity and reason. She wore massive designer sunglasses that made her look like a budget villain from a spy movie. "Do you even know who I am?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Alex didn't answer. He simply blinked, maintaining his stone-faced professionalism. Years in the Marines had taught him one valuable skill: never react to unnecessary nonsense. But Karen wasn't used to being ignored. In her world, silence was an unforgivable offense. "Oh, I see how it is," she muttered, her expression darkening. "You think you're too good to talk to me? Just another overpaid rent-a-cop standing around doing nothing?" Alex still didn't flinch. He'd faced enemy fire overseas. He wasn't about to be rattled by a middle-aged diva with a superiority complex. But Karen wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "Okay," she huffed. "If you're not going to be useful, I'll just make you useful." With that, she stormed back to her Jeep and yanked open the trunk. For a moment, Alex thought she might be grabbing a phone or a clipboard, something petty. Instead, she emerged holding a large black garbage bag tied at the top and bulging like it was ready to burst. "You've got to be kidding me," Alex thought. Karen stomped back toward him, her heels clicking on the pavement, like the drum roll to some twisted performance. The crowd of onlookers started murmuring, phones subtly pointed in her direction. "Since you're clearly just standing here wasting time, why don't you do something productive?" she sneered. Before Alex could respond, she dropped the garbage bag at his feet. The impact sent a wave of foul-smelling air into the atmosphere. The bag split open, spilling its contents: rotting fruit, takeout containers, and other unidentifiable horrors. The stench hit like a punch to the nose. The tourists collectively gasped. A man in a Hawaiian shirt muttered, "Oh man, that's disgusting," as he pulled out his phone to record the scene. Karen, completely oblivious to the growing crowd around her, smiled triumphantly. To her, this was justice served. Alex, however, remained calm. He didn't move an inch, despite the filth now staining his polished boots. "Ma'am," he said in a deep, measured tone, "are you aware that this could be considered assault?" Karen froze for a split second, clearly not expecting any pushback. Then she burst out laughing, a condescending cackle that echoed across the courtyard. "Assault? Oh, give me a break," she scoffed. "You're just a security guard. No one cares what you think. You're standing in garbage, and you want to talk about assault? Please." Her words echoed louder than she probably intended. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some tourists exchanged glances, clearly uneasy with the way this was playing out. A young woman whispered to her friend, "Is she serious right now? This is insane." Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, a voice called out, "That's racist, lady!" The tension thickened. Karen's head snapped toward the source of the comment, her lips tightening into a thin line. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But it didn't last long. "My husband's a lawyer," she said, raising her chin defiantly. "He'll have this whole situation handled in 5 minutes. Alex fought the urge to roll his eyes. Instead, he stayed silent, letting her dig her own grave. Meanwhile, the crowd had grown larger, and more phones were now aimed at Karen than at the mansion. People whispered, "This is going to blow up online," and "Someone's definitely posting this." Sure enough, a pink-haired girl near the front pulled out her phone and hit upload. Within seconds, a notification pinged on someone's screen. "Entitled woman dumps trash on black security guard. Watch what happens next." The murmurs grew louder. Alex could hear snippets of conversations, words like viral, exposed, and canceled, floating around like buzzwords. He didn't need to check the internet to know that this situation was spiraling. Karen, however, remained blissfully ignorant. She folded her arms and smirked like she'd already won. "Look, I don't have time for this nonsense," she said, turning on her heel. "You people need to mind your own business." But the crowd wasn't going anywhere. A man in a baseball cap called out, "You might want to rethink that attitude, lady. You're trending." Karen stopped mid-step, her confidence wavering for the first time. Alex could see the wheels turning in her mind, the slow realization that this wasn't going to end well. He crossed his arms and waited. Sometimes, karma just needed a little push, and today it was coming in the form of thousands of views and counting. Hours after the incident at the mansion, Alex stood in the small security office, surrounded by buzzing voices and glowing phone screens. The room was alive with energy as his colleagues huddled around Mark's phone like it was broadcasting the Super Bowl. For Alex, however, the only thing on his mind was how quickly the situation had spiraled out of control. "Bro, this is insane," Mark said, waving Alex over. His voice was a mix of shock and glee. "You've got to see this." Alex took a slow sip of his coffee before finally stepping forward. He wasn't exactly in the mood for more drama, but curiosity tugged at him. Mark turned the phone toward him, revealing a TikTok video with over 1.2 million views and climbing. The caption read, "Rich white lady dumps trash on black security guard. Watch karma hit back." The video showed the entire scene, Karen's tantrum, the garbage spill, the tourists' reactions, and the part where someone yelled, "That's racist!" It was all there, clear as day, with no room for spin. "Comments are nuts, man. Check it out," Mark said, scrolling through with a smirk. Alex leaned in closer, reading some of the most upvoted ones. "Are you kidding me? Stuff like this still happens in 2025? This woman needs to be arrested, period. Does anyone know who she is? Let's make sure everyone does." The words hung in the air like a warning. Alex's stomach tightened. He wasn't one to care much about internet drama, but this was different. People weren't just angry, they were mobilizing. Social media had turned into a digital mob, and Karen was at the center of their rage. "Dude, you're famous now," another guard, Luis, chimed in. He grinned like Alex had just won the lottery. "You're all over the news feeds. Even influencers are talking about it." Alex shook his head, setting his coffee down on a nearby desk. "Yeah, great. That's exactly what I wanted, to go viral over a trash bag." "Hey, could be worse," Luis said with a chuckle. "At least you didn't end up in one of those cringe TikTok dances." "Not helping," Alex muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. He could feel the weight of the attention growing by the second. Viral fame might sound cool to some people, but for Alex, it was a headache waiting to happen. Meanwhile, Karen Miller was blissfully unaware of the online chaos unfolding around her. She had returned home to her luxurious Manhattan mansion and settled into her usual evening routine. A glass of expensive white wine sat on the marble coffee table in front of her as she flipped absent-mindedly through channels on her TV. To Karen, the day's events were a minor inconvenience, a moment of inconvenience that would soon be forgotten, just like every other time someone had dared to challenge her authority. She took a slow sip of wine, savoring the taste, when suddenly, "Mom!" The shout echoed through the high-ceilinged living room. Karen's 16-year-old son, Dylan, came barreling in like he'd seen a ghost. His face was pale and his phone was gripped tightly in his hand. "Mom, you're everywhere!" he gasped, eyes wide with panic. Karen frowned, setting down her glass. "What are you talking about, Dylan?" "You're on the internet," he said, shoving the phone toward her. "Like everywhere. People are going crazy." Karen snatched the phone and squinted at the screen. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then it hit her like a freight train. There she was, front and center in the video. The freeze frame showed her mid-tirade, with garbage spilling onto the ground, and Alex standing stoically in the background. The caption didn't mince words. Entitled "Woman Dumps Trash on Guard. The Internet Isn't Having It." Karen's eyes widened as she scrolled through the endless stream of comments. "Yup, that's a Karen, if I've ever seen one. Cancel her, no excuses. She deserves everything coming her way." Her heart began to race. This couldn't be happening. People were already identifying her by name. One comment even listed her home address. Karen's hand trembled as she clicked on the next thread. It was worse than she had feared. There were posts calling for protests outside her house. Some users were sharing memes, while others discussed possible legal action. "This can't be real," she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Dylan, this has to be some kind of prank. Tell me this is fake." "It's not fake, Mom," Dylan said, his voice shaky. "People are talking about coming here. They're saying you should be arrested." Karen stood abruptly, almost knocking over her wine glass. Her mind raced through possibilities. She needed to get ahead of this before it spiraled out of control. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed her husband's number. It rang once, twice, straight to voicemail. "Answer the phone," she hissed through gritted teeth. She tried again. Nothing. Desperation clawed at her throat as she dialed again and again, each time met with the same dead end. Dylan watched her, clearly unnerved by her growing panic. "Mom, maybe we should call the police or something." "The police?" Karen mumbled to herself before nodding quickly. Yes, that's exactly what I'll do." She dialed 911, her voice trembling as she spoke to the operator. "Hello, yes, this is Karen Miller. I'm being targeted by an online mob. People are threatening me. They know my address. I need protection." The operator asked her to clarify, but Karen's explanation was a jumbled mess of half-truths and panic. She described the video as manipulated and out of context, insisting that she was the victim of harassment. The operator promised to send officers to assess the situation. Back at the mansion, Alex's phone buzzed with a text from his friend Daniel, a civil rights attorney. "Hey man, saw the video. You doing okay?" Alex sighed and texted back. "Yeah, I'm good. Just trying to stay out of the spotlight." Daniel wasn't convinced. His next message came quickly. "This thing's blowing up nationally. News outlets are covering it, and advocacy groups are weighing in. One organization wants you to make a public statement. This could be big." Alex stared at the message, his thoughts racing. He wasn't sure how he felt about becoming a public figure in this kind of situation. He didn't want to be anyone's poster boy for social justice, but at the same time, he couldn't deny the opportunity to shed light on something bigger than himself. "Think about it," Daniel added. "This could make a real difference." Alex sighed again, pocketing his phone. He needed time to think, but time wasn't a luxury he had right now. When the police arrived at Karen's house, she practically dragged them inside. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. I'm being harassed, threatened." The officers exchanged glances. "Ma'am, we've seen the video," one of them said calmly. Karen's face fell. "What? Video?" The officer pulled out his phone and showed her the viral clip. Karen's jaw dropped as she watched herself in all her entitled glory. The crowd's reactions, the accusations of racism, it was all there. "Ma'am," the officer continued, "from what we can see, you're the one who instigated the confrontation. Filing a false report is a serious matter." Karen stammered, her mind scrambling for an explanation. "That's not what happened. That video is edited. It's fake." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, multiple recordings and eyewitness accounts match the footage. I suggest you think carefully about your next steps." Karen's world was crumbling, and for the first time, she had no idea how to fix it. The internet wasn't going to forget. Neither was the law. An hour after Karen's frantic call to 911, the sharp sound of a knock echoed through the front entrance of her mansion. It wasn't just any knock. It was one of those authoritative, no-nonsense knocks that demanded attention. Karen froze mid-step, her pulse spiking. For a split second, she entertained the hope that the police had arrived to protect her from the dangerous mob she imagined brewing on the internet. "Finally," she muttered under her breath, smoothing her blouse. She didn't want to appear rattled. This was her house, her fortress. She was the one under attack, right? Dylan, her son, nervously peeked down from the staircase. "Mom, maybe you should let me answer it," Karen scoffed, shaking her head. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm the homeowner here. I'll handle this." With a deep breath, she strode to the door and swung it open, ready to launch into a tirade. But whatever speech she had prepared vanished the moment she saw the two officers standing on her front porch. They weren't here to reassure her. Their faces were hard as stone, serious, detached, and not remotely interested in hearing about her so-called victimhood. Behind them, a small group of curious neighbors had gathered, phones already aimed and recording. Karen's confident facade began to crack. "Karen Miller?" one officer asked, his voice clipped and professional. "Yes," Karen answered cautiously, her eyes darting between them and the growing crowd on the sidewalk. The officer adjusted his posture slightly and spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Ma'am, you are under investigation for filing a false police report and for engaging in discriminatory behavior in a public setting." Karen's jaw dropped. The words hit her like a cold slap to the face. For a moment, all she could do was blink in disbelief. "What?" she finally gasped. "No, this has to be some kind of mistake. I was the one being harassed." The second officer remained silent, but his eyes told her everything she needed to know. They weren't buying it. "Ma'am," the first officer continued, "we've reviewed the video footage along with multiple eyewitness statements. The evidence clearly contradicts your claims." No, you don't understand." Karen's voice rose, becoming shrill and frantic. "That video is fake. It's been edited to make me look bad. I was provoked. This is a setup." She gestured wildly toward the street, hoping for sympathy from the onlookers. None came. The officers didn't flinch. One of them pulled out a small notepad and calmly flipped it open. "Ma'am, you're not helping your case by shouting. We need you to step outside so we can discuss this matter further." Karen's eyes darted back to the crowd. More neighbors were gathering now, whispering amongst themselves and snapping pictures. Phones were everywhere, capturing her every movement and expression. The humiliation hit like a tidal wave. Her blood boiled. "You all have nothing better to do, do you?" she snapped at the crowd. "Filming my personal business? Pathetic." The murmurs intensified, and Karen could hear bits and pieces of their conversations. "Is this really happening? I saw the TikTok. She's done for. This is better than Netflix." Karen turned back to the officers, her face red with fury. "This is harassment. I'm a taxpayer. I have rights. You're supposed to be protecting me, not accusing me." The officers exchanged a glance, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, we've informed you of the charges. If you refuse to cooperate, we will have to take further action." "Charges?" Karen's voice cracked as panic set in. "You can't charge me with anything. I want my lawyer, now." "You'll have the opportunity to contact legal representation once you're processed," the officer replied coolly. "For now, we need you to comply." Karen shook her head violently, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. She was Karen Miller, a respected figure in her community, or at least she thought she was. "No, I'm not going anywhere," she declared, stomping her foot like a child in the middle of a tantrum. "Mom, please!" Dylan's voice trembled from behind her. He was still standing halfway up the staircase, his face pale and tear-streaked. "You're making this worse. Just stop." Karen froze for a moment, glancing at her son. His words hit her like a punch to the gut, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She turned away from him, crossing her arms defiantly. The officers had heard enough. One of them calmly stepped forward and reached for her wrists. "Ma'am, you are under arrest. Please turn around." "What? No, this is illegal. You can't do this to me," Karen screamed. struggling as the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The crowd erupted in murmurs and sarcastic remarks. "Instant karma, folks," someone chuckled. "She really thought she could talk her way out of this," another voice added. Karen's face turned beet red as she continued thrashing against the officer's hold. "Get these things off me. I want to speak to your supervisor." The officers didn't respond. They led her down the front steps, her heels awkwardly clacking on the concrete as she stumbled. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every humiliating second. Dylan hid his face in his hands, too ashamed to look at what was happening. Back at the security post, Alex was wrapping up his shift when his phone buzzed again. He pulled it from his pocket and saw a new notification. The headline made him pause. "Karen Miller's arrest goes viral. Karma strikes again." Curiosity got the better of him. He opened the video and watched as Karen was marched out of her mansion, still yelling about her rights while her neighbors gleefully recorded the spectacle. The comment section was already flooded with reactions. Well, that escalated quickly. Public meltdown of the century. Karma's not just real, she's filming in 4K. Alex chuckled softly, shaking his head. It was surreal how quickly things had spiraled. In the span of a single day, Karen had gone from entitled troublemaker to viral cautionary tale. He'd seen justice play out in many forms over the years, but this was a whole new level. Sometimes, justice didn't need a courtroom or a long legal battle. Sometimes, all it took was a camera, a crowd, and the unstoppable force of the internet. Alex slipped his phone back into his pocket and leaned against the booth, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he muttered to himself, "looks like the internet doesn't miss." What would you have done in Alex's place? Do you think the situation was handled fairly? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know ever faced something similar? Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, share, and support stories like this that shed light on real issues. This story was created to promote awareness and inspire positive change.